Avi Loeb calls for UN protocols on alien technology after 3I Atlas discovery and why it matters. National space agencies are delaying the release of high-resolution images from Mars orbiters, which allows NASA to scrub evidence of extraterrestrial life. Classified UFO programs hidden from Congress can now be lawfully subjected to renewed executive oversight. There is an extraterrestrial connection to the Q movement that red-pilled hundreds of millions in 2017. Disloyal US flag officers arrested at Quantico, Trump's ascent to world leader, and destruction of deep state, deep underground military bases. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to this October 18 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. We've got a few stories to cover this week, some exciting developments. So let's begin here with a video from JP, recently retired from the US Army, who put together a video on this new whistleblower, Daniel, who did a interview on Weaponized, who discussed seeing a triangle-shaped UFO at Eglin Air Force Base in 2006. And this UFO was about 600 feet in diameter, the approximate size of the famed TR-3B. And JP, in his video, what he did was he discussed his experience with similar triangle-shaped UFOs at Eglin Air Force Base. So let me play a short clip from the update that JP did on his YouTube channel.
Guys doing? JP is here. I'm happy to say that there's more insiders coming out from the military, from the same base where I was stationed. And I said that these things was going to happen. This was going to happen. That other soldiers from my same unit from Eglin Air Force Base were going to come out and talk about their experience. 8 months ago, I did a video with Dr. Michael E. Salla about my experience in Eglin Air Force Base with these ships that were coming down and they were connecting telepathically with other soldiers that had psionic abilities. I was part of that group that they lined up. And you guys remember the experience, right? This is the experience right here, real quick.
These beautiful ships were coming in pairs, and we were standing in line in a meditative state, and creeping behind us, these ships were coming in, and you can hear the humming noise. It's beautiful. And it was choosing which soldier was in a meditative state, connecting with them in a telepathic way. It was a beautiful experience.
So this happened in Eglin Air Force Base.
Okay, so you can watch the full update there by JP that runs for 18 minutes. But what he's talking about here is that this new whistleblower reporting on Eglin Air Force Base and seeing these triangle-shaped vehicles, that Eglin Air Force Base is a hub for these secret space program projects that are ongoing. And that incident JP described was one of several where there were these triangle-shaped craft landing, and in the case he was describing, there were pilots who would travel to that landed flying triangle, and telepathically they connected with it, that the craft had an organic consciousness who would respond to it. So really amazing stuff. That update is on my website, and you can find out about it there. Here is something, it's a story concerning Loeb, Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard University, calling for United Nations protocols on alien technology after 3I Atlas discovery and why it matters. So he is saying that the United Nations needs to develop some protocols to deal with potential alien technology before it's too late. So, I mean, here he's making the big assumption that alien technology hasn't yet been discovered, and he, Avi Loeb, and all these new scholars and astronomers and think tank experts who are stepping forward now are breaking new ground, and all the stuff that people have been talking about for the last 30 years is conspiracy theory, ignore it. But now it's like, oh yes, serious scientists and whistleblowers are finding out that alien technology is real, and we need to develop protocols. I mean, that's the approach, unfortunately, that people like Avi Loeb are taking, that everything that was said 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago even about these topics, that should be just totally ignored, because the people making those statements, they weren't credentials, they were conspiracy theorists, they were operating with kind of like information that wasn't really reliable, scientific instruments that weren't very clear, and so on it goes. So, I mean, totally self-serving arguments, but, that is what's happening today. A lot of scientists coming forward and saying, oh, yeah, this extraterrestrial UFO issue is a very serious thing, and, I've developed the protocols. So now the United Nations should develop protocols for extraterrestrial technology. And of course, this overlooks that in 1978, there actually was a resolution, actually it was a United Nations decision passed because of the pressure put on the United Nations by the Prime Minister of Grenada at the time, who unfortunately was deposed in a CIA-led coup. But that's conspiracy theory, and scientists like Avi Loeb don't want to go there. So, but yeah, this is kind of like a continuation of that. That in 1978, the United Nations did actually vote in the General Assembly for a United Nations decision, not a resolution, a decision, because that's how the Britain and the United States wanted to water down the Prime Minister of Grenada's proposal for the creation of a United Nations agency to study UFOs and to make recommendations for doing this type of thing, of deciding what to do if we find out that extraterrestrial technology has been discovered. So, that was then, 1978, as I said. Today's crop of new scientists, scholars, whistleblowers, think tank experts, they want to now say that, we got to do all this from scratch now, that forget about what happened back then, let's just ignore it and we'll put together something now. And so maybe I'm being a little harsh, a little unfair. Maybe they want to resurrect what the UN decision, I think it was UN decision 426, just from memory, but definitely it was the Prime Minister of Grenada that was behind it, and that brought up these kinds of protocols. But I think Avi Loeb and the current crop of UFO researchers, they are making what I think is a legitimate case that there needs to be some kind of protocol put in place for dealing with this, and the United Nations should play a role in that. And in my recommendation would be, well, go back to the 1978 decision and kind of like dust that off, repackage it, get it passed as a resolution this time, and maybe even get the Security Council to pass it. And that way you would get the United Nations acting on this, and honoring a very, very brave man that was the Prime Minister of Grenada at the time, who paid the ultimate price for challenging the major powers and saying that the United Nations should develop a protocol for dealing with the discovery of extraterrestrial life. Okay, so here is another insightful channeling from the GFL Station. So this is a relatively new station. It's only been around, I think, only really cropped up this year, 2025, and they already have 145,000 subscribers. So people are resonating with the channeled communications from the GFL Station. And I did actually speak with the creator of the GFL Station, David Nichols, and he created a website for it as well. And he works with up to a dozen channelers, 10 or 12 channelers, who share their messages. And then they use voiceover articles with some music and some AI-generated artwork to illustrate it all. And it's become very, very popular. Now, I have spoken to David Nichols, and he's also one of the channels. He uses I think it's a pseudonym for the channels that he does, and asked him if he wanted to be interviewed, and he said he doesn't feel it's appropriate at this moment to be interviewed, but I could talk about our conversation and talk about him, and he's got a background as a Buddhist monk, and I was tremendously impressed with him. Quite honestly, I think he's a very, very evolved soul, and he is doing what he feels is best to help humanity both raise its consciousness, connect with our ultimate infinite source consciousness within us, and acknowledge the existence of extraterrestrial life. So I think he's very sincere, very dedicated, and I'm very impressed with the quality of the information that is coming out. And I'm kind of like, I think that this is good because on an informational level, you get to hear about the latest developments concerning extraterrestrial life. But I think on a more important level, the spiritual level, you get to focus on the development of your heart center, or they encourage one to connect with the infinite source intelligence that resides in each person's heart, and not to get distracted by external events, which is a kind of similar message to what came out in the Law of One material back in the 1980s, over 40 years ago, where it was like, they put out a lot of information about events, but they were always the Ra group, which was a sixth density collective consciousness, was always saying that all this information is really of secondary importance. The main importance in the messages we put out is that you need to connect with your infinite source intelligence, and that is how you can deal with what's coming. And I think that is absolutely right. And so I think the GFL Station is doing a really good job in both informing us, but also reminding us of the need to go within and make that the fulcrum of our discernment and our understanding of the big picture involving extraterrestrials, secret governments, and so forth. So in this particular message, what they talk about here is the role of the Vatican. And the Vatican, the Vatican is playing a big role, or will be playing a big role with the disclosure process. And what I found very impressive in this message, I mean, it goes, I think, for over an hour, is that it matches my own exopolitics research. And I know that David Nichols doesn't do a lot of reading. He just lives in a secluded area, and I know that he is very focused on putting out these channeled messages from about 10 to 12 different channelers, including himself. So what I found impressive was that this corroborates my research that the Vatican is going to be playing a big role with disclosure. I've been saying that for well over a decade now. This current Pope Francis, I think he is going to play a leading role. I mean, the first American Pope, and he will definitely be a leading figure in the disclosure process that is coming. And interestingly, in this message, they say how traditionally the Vatican hierarchy was really focusing on the dogmatic aspects of the message of Jesus and Christianity, the dogmatic process of just believing Jesus is the Savior. He died for your sins, and in believing in Him, you are atoned, and all of that stuff, which I don't buy into at all. But that the Vatican is now going through a deep spiritual reform where they start to talk about Catholic mystics who have been shunned for decades and centuries, really, that the Catholic mystics that talked about being able to find God within, that within us is this immeasurable light that shines, and that Jesus was showing us how we can connect with that light within. That's not part of the Catholic dogma, which is that, we are all sinners and we need Jesus. We need Jesus because his death was atonement for our sins. I mean, all that dogmatic bullshit. Sorry for anyone into that Catholic message. But that the Christian mystics, Saint Teresa, Eckhart, many Christian mystics going back a long, long way, talked about finding the light within, and they were kind of persecuted within the Catholic Church because of that. But now all of a sudden the Catholic Church is shifting to give more emphasis to that, because with the arrival of the extraterrestrials, dogma is not going to cut it anymore. No one's going to buy into the BS. That you need to be authentic. You need to really be connected to something profound in order to adapt to the arrival of extraterrestrials who have all of these technological advances, but at a spiritual level, that's where humanity can excel. And so to do that, we need to start going within. So the Catholic Church is doing that, and so they talk about that, and I think that's very important. Okay, here's a redacted interview I did with Clayton Morris, where we discussed 3i Atlas and why the national space agencies are delaying the release of high-resolution images that allows NASA to scrub evidence of extraterrestrial life. So this interview goes for about 15 minutes. So kind of short interview. 5 days ago, that interview came out. Now, the thing is, with this particular segment, was that at that time, 5 days ago, I was commenting that none of the NASA Mars orbiters had released any images of 3i Atlas as it approached the Mars in perihelion with Mars. And there are some very powerful telescopes in the Mars orbiters, and that to date they still haven't released anything, and that this is part of the pattern where NASA delays the release of images taken by its orbiters. And what that does is that it gives the NASA engineers or the photo experts at JPL and so forth time to scrub the images of anything incriminating, and that there was a time when NASA was doing live video feeds using their scientific instruments like they do with the Mars rover, that the Mars rover transmits things in through a live feed, and so that amateur astronomers can like get that live feed and process the images and release them pretty quickly, which they did with the 3i Atlas, but the image was very poor resolution, so you couldn't really see much at all with it. But the Mars orbiters that NASA have taken images, taken photos, and they still have not been released. So I think you can, well, I mean, NASA would say, well, this is because of the shutdown, the government shutdown, and that's why NASA's not releasing it. But I think it's part of this old pattern that's been around for decades, and we know from whistleblowers who have come forward, like Donna Hare and Carl Wolf, who were both Disclosure Project whistleblowers that came forward in 2001 in Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference, that NASA does scrub images that contain evidence of extraterrestrial life. So that's something whistleblowers have talked about. So that interview, we go into depth in that. And I noticed it has over 500,000 viewers, so clearly a lot of people are resonating with that message. Okay, so here's a short I did. Let's see. Let's play it. The coincidence between 3i Atlas approaching Mars and all the data being captured by NASA's Mars orbiters is not being released. And so, okay, so yeah, I'm talking about this process that we're seeing where NASA is just not releasing the images that the orbiters have taken of 3i Atlas, and the delay gives the NASA kind of hierarchy time to scrub those images of anything incriminating. So when we finally do get those images, there'll be nothing in them really of substance to see. So it looks like 3i Atlas is doing things that is getting a lot of attention, but yet we're not going to get any kind of official corroboration of that, which is unfortunate. All right, so here is something that I thought was very worth taking a look at, and that concerns a clarification, a decision that was made by the U.S. Supreme Court. So here's the decision that the Supreme Court have made it possible for the chief executive to sack members of quasi-independent bodies that previously had immunity from executive branch actions. So what that meant was that over the last decades, you could have these quasi independent bodies, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the FCC, but also you had these quasi-independent bodies within the national security system as well. And the president did not have any power over the employees. He couldn't just sack them and replace them with his people. And so what that meant was that when it came to the UFO topic, any of these quasi-independent bodies that dealt with the UFO issue, for that any of those would be immune from kind of like presidential oversight or presidential orders, and the chief executive could just kind of give the president the finger and say, I'm not going to tell you anything. I mean, that happened during the Carter administration with George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the CIA director, that Carter said to Bush, well, I want you to tell me about what's going on in these UFO programs, and Bush kind of gave him the finger, and Carter went ahead and basically sacked Bush as CIA director. Well, what has been happening is that could not occur with any quasi-independent body within the bureaucracy, where these people that headed that quasi-independent body, whether we're talking Federal Reserve, FCC, and so forth, and their equivalents in the National Security Council, that they just wouldn't have to follow the commands of the president. Well, the Supreme Court has now ruled that Trump has the power to sack people who head these quasi-independent bodies, and so this is where it finally gives Donald Trump the means to drain the swamp, because there's just a lot of these quasi-independent bodies within the US system, and so this then takes us to classified programs. That classified programs hidden from Congress can now be lawfully subjected to renewed oversight through subpoenas, funding conditions, and statutory reporting requirements, since no executive body may operate beyond accountability to either branch. So these quasi-independent bodies that previously were managing the UFO programs, now all of a sudden they can be subjected to oversight either through the Congress or through the Office of the President of the United States. So this ruling by the Supreme Court was very, very important in terms of enabling the Trump administration to finally deal with the swamp, and that the real power lay within the permanent bureaucracy that saw itself as separate and independent from both the legislative and the executive branches of government. Right, here's an interview I did with Sarah Breskman, where Sarah talked about Three Eye Atlas and the information she got from her sources, and one of the sources that she relied on in terms of Three Eye Atlas was giving her information that was communicated through the higher self, or the inner self, or the infinite source intelligence of this client of hers. And this is where you get into the whole QHHT protocol. Now, QHHT was developed by Dolores Cannon, I believe in the 1980s and 90s. And the way she would do it was that she would communicate with the higher self of a person to get more clarity about that person's past lives, but also get information about other things happening in that person's life or happening in the world around us. And so Sarah follows the same protocol. She's worked with over 1,000 clients in more than a decade of being a QHHT practitioner. And what she would do is to induce a hypnotic state in a person so that they would be channeling their higher self, or in communication with the higher self. And that Sarah, like Dolores Cannon before her and many other QHHT practitioners, would be asking questions of the higher self about that person, their past lives, or contemporary events of interest. And often what would happen would be that the person would be in such a deep hypnotic state that when they would wake up, they wouldn't know what they said. They didn't know what their higher self was saying. So this is kind of very similar to Edgar Cayce and full trance communications. So this is, I think, a very important, very legitimate form of communication gathering, or information gathering, I should say, when it comes to the whole phenomenon concerning extraterrestrial life and UFOs. And so what Sarah did was that she was communicating with one of her clients, and what she got from this client's higher self is that the 3i Atlas possesses the consciousness of ancient extraterrestrials that has arrived to uplift our solar system and humanity by disseminating unique frequencies containing transformative DNA codes, according to quantum healing hypnosis. Practitioner Sarah Breskman. So she mentioned October 16th, so that was a Thursday, as a key date for the dissemination of these frequencies codes, according from the information that she received from one of her clients. Now, I think that this perspective that Sarah got about 3i Atlas is very, very helpful. I did an article a week ago where I included Sarah and others in terms of 11 perspectives on 3i Atlas. And I think this was clearly one of those perspectives that put it in the camp of positive extraterrestrials wanting to raise the frequency codes of our planet. Sarah said that she was told that this was very much connected with Lyran extraterrestrials, that they were responsible in some way with 3i Atlas in terms of their consciousness and the frequency codes it transmitted. So that's my interview with Sarah Breskman. Okay, now James Gilliland, he did a YouTube update. Okay, so he did a YouTube update, and he talked about 3i Atlas, and he, in his view, 3i Atlas is a mirror for the consciousness of the person or people that are viewing 3i Atlas. And in the paper I did on my website just a week ago, I came up, as I said, with 11 perspectives, but they broke down into 3 categories. And basically the categories were the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And so you got variations on that. Good extraterrestrials, bad extraterrestrials, or indifferent. They're kind of enigmatic. We're not quite sure what they're up to. Those were the 3 broad categories. And according to James Gilliland, he said that that is very predictable because 3i Atlas is a mirror, that involves some very high level extraterrestrials. And I think he said that they were from a 6th dimension, according to James's understanding of it, and that people would see their own stuff reflected in that. And that in order to properly understand what 3i Atlas is, you need to outgrow the kind of subjective biases that you have and look at it from a Buddhic perspective, which is kind of like a clear mind where you are not influenced by your own subjective belief systems. So I think that is spot on, actually. I think that's exactly how 3i Atlas should be understood, that it is in a way a mirror, which is why we're getting so many different perspectives on it, and that it is a reflection or a mirror of our own subjective bias. And this is where it comes back down to dealing with our or getting in touch with one's own inner source or higher self, inner self, infinite source intelligence, because once you are in touch with that, you can more clearly understand the extraterrestrial phenomenon around us. And I think that is what we are all going to be facing in the years ahead. that 3i Atlas is not a one-off. I think there's going to be many examples involving artifacts, developments, where we are going to be dealing with something which is going to involve this mirroring effect. And depending on the kind of subjective beliefs of the people viewing that phenomenon, you're going to come up with determinations that, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is like enigmatic, we're not quite sure. And that achieving this kind of clear state of mind, or this Buddhic consciousness that James is talking about here, I think is going to be very, very important. And certainly because the extraterrestrial issue has been mismanaged for so long by the secret government agencies working with military intelligence groups and with corporations, I think we as private citizens need to really stand our ground and say, okay, we need to play a role in understanding and developing responses to this phenomenon, and not just leave it to these people that have been for decades keeping us private citizens out of the loop because we were regarded as, too immature, too stupid, however they justified it, sheep and not able to make their own decisions, however they understood us, that this is the challenge that we are going to be facing. Because I think if we leave it up to these people, they're likely to jump into this kind of whole threat assessment analysis and say, oh, okay, well, 3i Atlas has reptilians on it, and they're here to kind of like eat us, or have us for lunch, and let's get ready for the war. And so it's like, no, something else is going on here. So that's where I think we need to really hold our ground, and that's going to be, I think, a big necessity of an imperative over the next few years that are coming. But I think we'll be up to the task, the private sector. Okay, so here's another message from GFL Station. This is from Dave Akira, or David Nichols, and the Ashtar Command. So he's channeling the Ashtar Command here, and he's talking about the Middle East peace process, or the Gaza Peace Deal that was just struck, and how that affects the extraterrestrial disclosure. So he made a number of important points, and I just wanted to mention those to you. The first is that there's been a third force manipulating both sides of a conflict that seeks to perpetuate Middle East conflicts and make them intractable. So on both sides of a conflict there, so the Israel-Hamas conflict, that on both sides there's a third force like inflaming the extremists on both sides to like hold their ground, not compromise, and just fight it out. That a third force has been kind of like encouraging that. And that's what we've seen. The second point is that there are many ancient treasures involving advanced technologies, extraterrestrial life, and space-time portals that lie hidden under Middle Eastern countries that have been controlled and kept secret by the deep state for centuries. So I think this is a very important point for understanding the Israel-Palestine conflict, that it's more than just geopolitical tensions between the Israelis, who tend to side with the West and the United States, and the Arabs, who tended to side more with kind of like, say, the Soviet Union or the Eastern Bloc countries. That whoever was dominant in a particular area would be able to exploit the underground technologies that were hidden in that part of the world for the benefit of that group that they were allied with. President Trump is the head of an Earth alliance that has defeated the deep state in a secret war, and that the Gaza Peace Deal removes the last remaining card the deep state had to create a third world war. So I know some of you that are watching this you will consider Donald Trump to be a buffoon and in no way hitting anything other than his own kind of inflated ego and doing everything to promote his business interests in all over the world. Well, I don't agree with that. And certainly this particular channeling from the Ashtar Command and Dave Akira is saying that Trump is in fact playing a very important role as the head of the Earth Alliance that has now defeated the deep state in a secret war that exploiting this Middle East conflict, or exploiting the conflict between Hamas and Israel, was the last remaining card the deep state had to play to create a third world war. There are some geopolitical analysts who are now saying, well, yes, this ceasefire is in effect, but other aspects of the agreement are unlikely to come into effect, and that what we're going to see is Israel launch a preemptive attack on Iran very, very soon. Well, according to this analysis, that's not going to happen, and I kind of think that that is correct. That the attempt to foment a war with Iran is not going to happen because Trump is wanting this peace deal to actually be the catalyst for a wider peace deals between Israel and other countries in the Middle East, the so-called Abraham Accords that have been put on hold because of the Israel-Hamas conflict, but also because of tensions with Iran. So I personally think this peace deal is going to hold, and it's going to expand with more states coming on board, and that's certainly what Dave Akira and the Ashtar Command are saying. And finally, nothing will stop the disclosure of extraterrestrial life and advanced technologies, which will be revealed in a non-disruptive and accelerated way. So now that the deep state has been defeated, and they are kind of like no longer have the power to delay the disclosure process, that the White Hats or the Earth Alliance are now going to start revealing some of the advanced technologies, and then eventually we're going to have announcements concerning extraterrestrial life. So, for example, medbeds. Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago released something about medbeds, so that's one of the technologies we can expect to be released pretty soon, and that you're going to have announcements coming fairly soon about say the discovery of extraterrestrial biological life, microbes and so forth on a distant planet using the James Webb Space Telescope, biosignatures, discovering ancient technologies elsewhere, and so forth. But these disclosures are going to be presented in a organic, structured way so that the entire planet gets up to speed without there being societal breakdown. Okay, here's a comment or a tweet by Dr. Horace Drew, who I first heard about him in terms of his crop circle research. And he dropped something very, very interesting. He said that Q, that I'm sure many of you are aware of, that kind of like in 2017, you had the Q movement appear, and a lot of people were convinced that this was a branch of US military intelligence that was working with the first Trump administration to red pill people about the deep state and what was really going on, how the system operated. And according to Dr. Horace Drew, the Q movement originated from an extraterrestrial from the Pleiades, and he adopted that term Q to put out a lot of information, and that he came out here because he was tasked with defending humans on Earth from an upcoming alien takeover attempt by the grey aliens. And so he's talking about the Q movement as really being anchored in or having a foundation in this extraterrestrial presence, that there is these positive extraterrestrials, Pleiadians, that are trying to help the Earth, help humanity free itself from an attempted takeover by these grey aliens. And so he goes on to talk about Q and certain crop circles. But certainly I think it is well worth considering. I have come across others that have thought that there's a Q connection, there's an extraterrestrial connection to the Q movement. And so now we get a little bit more detail on who that extraterrestrial connection is, or what it is, and that involves this military intelligence expert from the Pleiades that came out, or this military strategist from the Pleiades that came out to help the Earth deal with the grey takeover attempt. Okay, so here is a trailer for my next webinar that's coming up. So it just goes for 2 minutes. I'm not going to play it now because the music would lead to us getting a copyright strike, and so we don't want that. But this trailer just kind of describes some key questions about what is coming our way. And I think those of you that are interested in learning about some of the incredible changes that are coming, that everything, and I've already addressed some of these issues so far in this week in review, that the Trump administration is working with others around the world to promote peaceful relations, to bring about peace in the Middle East, and world peace has always been an important condition for extraterrestrial disclosure. And I think we're going to have the release of some of the advanced technologies that I've already described, and of course that would include things like medbeds. Now I'm going to have two experts join me, two panelists. One will be George Kavassilas, and the other will be JP. And they have complementary but very different perspectives on what's coming. So I'll start off with a presentation, and then JP and George Kavassilas, they'll be the two panelists that I'll be asking questions of during the panel portion of this webinar. And finally, there'll be an hour of Q&A. So this is the Disclosure Truth Apocalypse webinar coming up on October 25, and you can get more information from my website, exopolitics.org, about that. Okay, so here is a let's just say that this is a presentation by a whistleblower who talked about the personal challenges he had in coming forward as a whistleblower talking about UFOs, which is quite contrary to what people would have expected, given the creation of the AARO office. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was created just a couple of years ago with the express purpose of giving whistleblowers the opportunity to be able to come in, share their information concerning UFOs without any retaliation, and to be able to be supported in getting their information out. Well, it actually turned out to be the opposite. Like the AARO office turned out to be a gatekeeper under its first director and its current director. It was a gatekeeper that would hear these whistleblowers, but really do nothing with their testimony other than just file it away and say that there's a lack of evidence supporting it, and that these whistleblowers faced retaliation. They lost their careers because of that. and it is very difficult for a professional to lose their career because they act out. Now, I went through this myself in 2001 and up to 2004, where I began as an assistant professor at a fairly prestigious university, American university, when I got involved in the UFO issue and wanted to study it and put it out. And after 3 years of struggling with the university, I was summarily dismissed, my program cancelled, and my career was pretty much burned. And this seems to still be happening, which is very, very unfortunate that after more than 20 years, despite the US Congress having hearings, multiple hearings, there being the creation of these bodies such as the Arrow Office, and there's been some legislation passed, still whistleblowers are being ostracized or being retaliated against for coming forward and talking about these subjects. So that's very, very unfortunate. Okay, so here is something that I think is well worth considering here. Okay, there won't be any real disclosure of American UFO-related R&D programs until and unless a majority of people are ready to understand why large-scale child abuse and sexual manipulation of minors has taken place since the 1950s. And he talks about Ender's Game and Stranger Things, saying that this is connected to the UFO issue. And this is actually a very important point that Jason Reza Georgiani, I hope it's pronounced that way, that he's making a connection here between this kind of like abuse that has been happening against women and children, minors, for decades, going back to the 1950s. And what's not well known is that there is a big connection between UFO-related R&D programs and this kind of like, I mean, you really can almost call it industrial scale child abuse. That they're doing it because they needed, and we're talking thousands of children, for these experiments that were happening, not just in places like the Dulce underground base, but also places like Montauk Island, that they were using children to test these space-time portals. And children seem to be able to handle the energies of these space-time portals better than adults. And so that's why they kind of put, like, one of the estimates I got was that in the 10 years that the Montauk program was running, from 1971 up until 1984, something like that, that 10,000 children had been abducted, put into these programs, and the vast majority died because of the abuse, because of what was happening to them, the mind control, the kind of like technologies that they were testing out, space-time portals and so forth, and that only relatively few survived. And one of those was Stuart Swerdlow, who I've interviewed once before, and there have been others. So yes, definitely this is something that cannot be ignored, and that at some point there will be an accounting for this. All right, well, here's an interview I just did with Gene Decode that came out on Thursday on my YouTube channel and Rumble and also Patreon. And this is where he talked about disloyal US flag officers were actually arrested at Quantico. So according to Gene and his information, now Gene Decode, that name is a pseudonym, and he chose that because he achieved a very high rank as an NCO in the US Navy. His career spanned more than 20 years, and he worked a lot with special forces, and he worked on 5 classes of submarines, 4 of which were nuclear and because of the work he had done with special forces, his knowledge of underground bases and special operations, he decided that it was too dangerous for him to reveal his name and releasing his documents and so forth, that it would be too dangerous. So he used the pseudonym Gene Decode. He has not yet released his public documents, and he's been able to kind of like elude retaliation because people can't confirm a lot of his information. But certainly those people who have met him privately, I know of 2 people who have met him privately, know his real name and so forth, and they say absolutely he's the real deal. And I've interviewed him, I think, a half a dozen times now, and his knowledge of the US military operations, especially the Navy, is second to none. So here he talks about flag officers being arrested at Quantico, that they were given the choice whether they would follow or perform their constitutional duty of supporting the Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, or whether they had another agenda. And lie detector tests were conducted, and people that failed were removed. So he estimated more than 200 flag officers were removed, many arrested, and that they will be facing court-martial. So very important stuff there, because I think there was this plan by the deep state to create a civil war in the United States, and they had a lot of compromised military officers at high levels embedded within the Pentagon, and that these compromised officials were in fact Satanists. And Satanism is a very significant movement within the upper echelons of not just the military, but of Congress, of governments, and wherever it is able to gain a foothold. So, according to Gene, Donald Trump is on the path to becoming the world leader. And that is very, very interesting. And I see it. It's so obvious that all these peace agreements that Donald Trump is forging, that it's almost like a marketing campaign being conducted by this Earth Alliance to make Trump the undisputed leader of the planet, because he's able to bring about peace all over the planet. And no one else, no major world leader is even close to him. Of course, President Putin of Russia is embroiled in a major war. And President Xi Jinping, he performed an amazing feat of diplomacy several years ago, where he was able to get Iran and Saudi Arabia to sign a peace accord. But since then, China hasn't been very prominent at all in bringing about peace agreements. And I think the fact that Trump is doing it is because there is a plan to make him the world leader. So we talk about that in this interview as well. All right, so here is the next interview coming out on American Alchemy. And I believe you can actually watch it now if you're a member of the American Alchemy YouTube channel. And it concerns Dan Sherman, a 12-year Air Force veteran. So let's just listen in to the 1-minute clip promoting this particular interview.
Anyway, we just sat there and he unveiled this mind-blowing thing to me, proceeded to tell me that I was part of a project that started in 1960, I believe it was. And the genesis of it was in 1947. We came in contact with an alien species. And 1960, they started a project. It was called Project Preserve Destiny. It was designed to genetically manage fetuses human fetuses so that they would have the heightened ability to do this particular thing that I was going to school for. My mother was one of the selected targets, or whatever you want to call it. The result of it was that it gave me the ability to have this communications.
That was in order for you to become an intuitive communicator who is basically able to receive messages from
receive and transmit.
Receive and transmit.
Yeah, communicate basically back and forth.
And he's telling you all this?
Yeah, he said that that's what my job would be doing, or that's what my job would be to do that. Yes.
Okay, so that's Jesse Michaels interviewing Dan Sherman, who's done very few interviews over the years. I know he did one with Project Camelot well over a decade ago. I've tried to reach him a few times. I haven't been successful in reaching him. So he's definitely someone that very rarely does interviews, but hats off to Jesse Michaels and American Alchemy for being able to find him and get him to agree to do a new interview. And I thought it was very significant that he said that it was 1960 that that Project Preserve Destiny began, because that validates sources that say that in the 1950s, during the Eisenhower administration, there were these agreements reached with these off-world visitors, with the grey extraterrestrials. And Project Preserve Destiny was one of the agreements that was reached, and that concerned the monitoring of people that were abducted and who were subjected to these genetic experiments. And of course, Dan Sherman is described in that short clip. He described his mother being abducted and being subjected to one of these experiments, and him being born as a result with heightened telepathic abilities to be able to both receive and transmit messages with extraterrestrials. And that's what he did for the National Security Agency, and you'll hear about that in the interview. I mean, he wrote a book called Above Black, I believe it is. Yes, Above Black, and he really is a very credible Air Force veteran, and I think this is a very positive step forward that he's coming forward now to talk about this. And certainly it would be great if he was to appear before the US Congress to talk about this, because I think this is where the US Congress has kind of like just dipping its toes into this war, into this field of UFOs, and hearing a few people like David Grush and talking about, well, yes, there've been crash retrieval operations and non-human intelligence are involved, but I think the real breakthrough is going to happen when you're going to have Congress being formed by credible whistleblowers, that there are these agreements that have been reached going all the way back to the 1950s, and that there are various projects that have arisen ever since. Dan Sherman was part of one. JP is part of another. And so I think that's where we're going to make big breakthroughs. Okay, so here is a overview of the underground network of tunnels, cities, and classified programs that was just put out by Clayton Morris on Redacted. And I think this is a very nice summary of some of the evidence of what exists underground in the United States and what they're preparing for. So it runs for 26 minutes, well worth watching. Clayton is very open to this kind of information concerning exopolitics, extraterrestrial life, hidden technologies, and he's been kind of red pilling a lot of people through his show Redacted, nearly 3 million subscribers. And that's very important to get this information out there to that big audience, even if there's not always solid evidence or proof. That it's important that people still hear about what is really going on, because the proof eventually will emerge, but we need to first present the information to people so that they can be psychologically prepared. So that's it for this week in review. Now, I just want to mention regarding my webinar on October 25. That's 1 week away. So in 1 week, you can register for this, and you can register through Crowdcast. Just go to the website exopolitics.org and you can register direct through Crowdcast, or you can register as a Patreon member. And I have different levels of membership on Patreon, and you can get a discount depending on your level of membership. You get a discount, and one of the levels includes this particular website, includes this webinar, or all my webinars. So you're not only, if you join as a galactic patron, which is $38 a month, not only do you get to see this panel webinar, but that price includes the last panel webinar I did, as well as all monthly briefings. And it's a great way to support my channel. I put out a lot of information every month for free. All of the interviews I do and the week in reviews, they're all for free, put out on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify. And the advertising I get from that is not enough to support this channel. But through your Patreon memberships, you do support me directly and my team. And we are very appreciative of all of you who have joined my Patreon channel and are members, because you do support my channel, and that enables a lot of people to get access to all these interviews for free. And we do often put out highlights of webinars as well for people who can't afford to register. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.